In this video, as we continue talking about enrichment, we're going to look specifically at how we fill out the reference in an utterance. Recall what we've already said about communication. Typically, we under-encode rather than saying everything we mean. And so hearers need to enrich what we have said to follow those signposts and clarify what it is we intended to communicate. We also mentioned 4 types of enrichment that might be necessary for a hearer. We talked about clarifying ambiguity, vagueness, ellipsis, and reference. In this video, we're going to focus on reference, clarifying what words or phrases are referring to. In order to begin to understand how our brains work out what different words are referring to in an utterance, let's look at an example. The cat caught a mouse, then it ate it. In order to understand what is being communicated by the second sentence here, we need to work out who both the its are referring to. Think about this for a minute. Your mind probably didn't have to work too hard to deduce that the first it refers to the cat, who is doing the eating, and the second it refers to the mouse, the thing eaten, unless this is part of some joke. But notice there is nothing in the form of the sentence that tells us the event happened this way around. The communicator has under-encoded what they wanted to communicate and is relying on the hearer's knowledge frames about cats and mice and which one typically eats the other one in order to get to the correct interpretation. How about if it said instead, the cat caught a mouse, then it bit it? In this case, it would be a lot more difficult for the hearer to assign reference correctly. Did the mouse bite the cat, or vice versa? Looking at this example also gives us a good opportunity to talk about the difference between sense and reference. This is a really important distinction for any study of semantics. We need to be clear that it is not an ambiguous word with different senses. It's not a word that sometimes has the sense cat and sometimes has the sense mouse. No, the sense of it remains the same in both uses in this sentence. The sense of it is always talking about a singular, non-human thing. What does change is the reference. The first time it refers to the cat, the second time it refers to the mouse. Here's another example where reference might be misleading that was spotted by one of my students. She saw a sign saying, if you're walking your dog, please remember to bag it and bin it. The most natural way to assign reference here would surely be to assume that it is your dog that you're supposed to bag and bin. And yet our brains easily work out that this does not make sense, and it must be referring to something else. Our knowledge of dog activity, and perhaps the little black dot behind the dog's back legs on this picture, help us to infer the correct reference, even though it's possibly not a word that the council wanted to write on the sign. Assigning reference is probably one of the most common causes of miscommunication in daily life. Think about those times when we talk about a friend, but we don't give their last name, and somebody thinks we mean another person with the same first name. Or when we use pronouns, and the other person isn't clear who it is that we're talking about. Or even when we've talked about something like, as I said in my earlier message, and we're not clear which earlier message it was. Look out for these kind of problems in your communication this week. It's not surprising then that assigning reference is also a significant issue for trying to understand biblical texts, where we are even further removed from the situation and may not infer the correct referent. Let's look at, as an example, at this extract from Luke's Gospel, where he's talking about John the Baptist. So, with many other exhortations, he proclaimed the good news to the people. But Herod the ruler, who had been rebuked by him because of Herodias his brother's wife, and because of all the evil things that Herod had done, added to them all by shutting up John in prison. This is a pretty difficult passage to understand anyway, but here there's a difference with the referent when it talks about his brother's wife. To me, the natural reading of this passage would be that Herodias was John's brother's wife, especially since John is clearly the reference of him in the previous clause, where it says that he had been rebuked by him. And also, Herod is reintroduced in the next clause by name because of all the evil things that Herod had done. However, because of other records, we know that actually Herodias was the wife of Herod's brother Philip. Different translations try to make this clearer, but one of the clearest is actually the contemporary English version, which changes this reported speech into direct speech, translating verse 19 as, "But to Herod the ruler he said, 'It was wrong for you to take Herodias, your brother's wife.'" By using your rather than his, it's very clear that it's Herod's brother's wife that's intended. Here are a few more biblical examples of potential problems with assigning reference. In Matthew 21 verse 7, the NIV says, "They brought the donkey and the colt, placed their cloaks on them, and Jesus sat on them." The issue here is the reference of "on them," which occurs twice, but it seems unlikely that it refers to the same thing both times. Presumably the first time it refers to the donkey and the colt as the place where the cloaks were placed. But the second time, surely it's unlikely that Jesus sat on both animals. Rather, "on them" must be referring to him sitting on the cloaks, presumably on one of the animals. So we need to enrich "on them" as referring to the donkey and the colt the first time, and as "on them" as referring to the cloaks the second time. Reference can be particularly difficult when there are different distinctions made in the pronoun systems of different languages, and then we start translating from one language to another. For example, in British English, we don't currently distinguish between you singular and you plural, whereas Greek does. So we often don't notice when someone in the Bible changes from talking to a group of people to talking to a single individual, or vice versa. For example, in Luke 22, 31 to 32, Jesus says, "Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift you," and here's the Greek plural, "as wheat. But I have prayed for you," with a Greek singular, "that your faith will not fail." To understand what is being communicated, we need to know the reference of both the yous. Presumably the first, plural you, is referring to the whole disciples, whereas the second one is just referring to Simon. How could you show this more clearly in English? Different translations choose different ways of doing it. Some show nothing at all, but the Revised English Bible chooses to sift all of you, whereas the New Living Translation has to sift each of you. Both cases, it's helping the reader to enrich the plural referent correctly. We've just been talking about the second person pronoun in English and the problem between singular and plural. In other languages, there's often a problem that pronouns do not mark the gender of the referent, and this can cause real problems for translation. For example, in Mark 1, we read that they came to the house of Simon and Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her. It's fairly clear in English that the him is referring to Jesus, even though he hasn't been mentioned just before. But in a language where him and her have the same form, this is going to be a lot more difficult to enrich correctly. It's very likely that a listener is going to assume that they told the woman about Jesus rather than the other way round. So how might they translate, "they told him about her"? It's probably going to be helpful to specify at least one of the referents and say something like, "they told Jesus about her," or "they told him about that woman." A final slightly different example of possible enrichment problems in the Bible comes from references to Herod in Luke 1 verse 5 and Acts 12 verse 1, for example. In the first of these examples, it talks about something in the time of Herod, king of Judea. And then again, we read in Acts 12 verse 1, it was about that time that King Herod did something. Is this Herod the same person? The reader needs to enrich this correctly. The problem is that in the first example, it refers to Herod the Great, whereas the second time, it's referring to Herod Agrippa I, who's Herod the Great's grandson. How much context would a Bible reader need to know if he's going to enrich this referent correctly? Is it even important that the reference is clear in a translation like this? This sort of question opens up a really intriguing question. How important is it for a translation to make the reference clear, or to make various other things clear? Is it the role of the translation Or is it more important to build up the understanding of readers in other ways, so that then when they come to the translation and read it, they are more likely to enrich it correctly? This is an issue we're going to come back to many times when talking about Bible translation. Let's recap. We've been talking about 4 different categories of enrichment that our minds go through to fill out what somebody has said to us. We've talked about ambiguity, vagueness, ellipsis, and reference. However, when our minds have done all this, have we actually finished working out what someone is trying to communicate to us? Almost certainly not. The next video is going to lead us into some further processes.